I was just talking with one of our sponsors, and he mentioned real briefly that everything's been going so beautifully today. It's like all our frustrations was yesterday, and Murphy's Law used up his whole quota of misfortune yesterday. So all we had left today was just like blessed luck. And my friend just told me that God takes care of his own. He said he was feeling a little sad because we're winding things down. And I mentioned, that's given, but you ain't seen nothing yet. Because believe me, this thing is going to be popping. We're going to end this thing on the highest note. And the last thing I want to mention, I could talk for 10 minutes on the whole story behind our last speaker. But I'll just suffice it to say that sometimes a spirit can reach 3,000 miles. Distance, prison walls, bars, it doesn't block it out. And when that spirit and when that message travels through time and space, it hits people, and it hits the right people right in the right spot, and people know. And somehow circumstances just work out, no matter what, no matter how long it takes. And just like those crossroads, serendipity just starts to get closer and closer until there's that connection and there's that spark, and everything just comes together at the right place at the right time. It explains this convention. It explains everybody here. It explains our guest speakers. It explains me. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to our outside chairman coordinator, Jim C. Would you like to come up and introduce our final speaker?
Thank you. Those claps really belong to Alcoholics Anonymous. I did the legwork. This is God's job. First of all, thank all of you very much. Very, very much from the bottom of my heart. It's 3 years in the making, and it happened. And it's a wonderful feeling. It's a dream come true. And that can only happen for me in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's where it did happen. And if you don't feel the magic in this get-together, then you're missing the greatest adventure of your life, because this is what AA is about. And I want to take a couple of minutes to tell you about your speaker. In the last 2 days, I've gotten to know this man very close. Every night we've had a two-person AA meeting on the deck of my house. And some of the best sharing that I've done in the last couple of years of my life happened on that deck. And I've gotten to develop a friendship and a brotherhood with a fellow AA 3,000 miles away. And he'll always be and forever be a part of my life. And I'd like to introduce to you my brother, Kip C.
How y'all doing? My name's Kip Collins, and I'm an alcoholic. I ain't had a drink all day long. I didn't hurt nobody today. Didn't hurt myself. I worked all week and paid my way. When I left home, my family was crying, wanted me to come back real quick. That might not impress y'all, but it sure does please my mother. I want to thank the committee, man. You have no idea. I do a lot of traveling. I'm a very busy person. I would rather be here than any place on the planet. I've been watching this thing. I'm an observer. I'm a very interested observer. I've been watching all the people here do the thing, man. I'm watching the spark. I'm watching the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous and listening to the speakers and watching the fellowship and just watching the deal go down. I got here from the beginning. We're trying to get food in here. I never had so much trouble getting inside of a jail in my whole life. I usually had a hell of a lot of harder time getting out than I did get in. But we just sat there and watched the show. Told Jim, I said, Jim, they're not and we're not powerful enough to screw this up. God's in charge of this, thank God. I want to thank Che for a letter he wrote me that touched my heart. I wasn't planning on taking any more speaking engagements this year. I've done over close to 150,000 miles of traveling doing this year, and I wasn't going to do another one. And I got a letter. I was on my way to Yosemite. Just before I left, I opened the mailbox, and there was a letter. I'm reading this letter. We're driving down the road. My wife's driving. And I got tears running down my eyes. She goes, "What is that?" I said, "Well, let me read it to you, darling." And I read it to her, and she's got tears running down her eyes. And she looked over at me and said, "You know you got to go, don't you?" And here I am, you know. I'll tell you a little bit what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. My father's Irish and Sioux. My mama's Irish and Cherokee. My daddy liked to drink, and my mama liked to fight. You know, the way it was in my house, man, you'd be waiting for the old man to get home. The later it got, the more the tension would build in that house. After a while, you looked out the window, you'd hear that truck coming up the road. You see all the neighbors turning off their lights, grabbing their lawn chair, and coming outside and getting comfortable. The show was getting ready to start, you know. Daddy'd go downtown, he gets the six-pack, come home with the SWAT team. Just a manner of living. We lived in a neighborhood. All my cousins are real dark. They have dark hair, dark skin, brown eyes. I lived in a neighborhood that was 99% Hispanic. I was the 1%. No one spoke English. Everyone had dark hair, brown eyes, dark skin. I was born with white hair, blue eyes, and very white skin. And when I went outside, the Mexicans wanted to beat my ass, and when I went in the house, the Indians wanted to beat my ass, you know? And that makes you one of two things, you know? Y'all know who the most dangerous person in the world is. That's the scaredest. And I was the scaredest human being on the face of the earth. And I learned at a very early age that if I could keep you afraid of me, you'd just back up. And I started putting on that armor when I was about 3 years old. And I had a brother. He was 11 months younger than me, and Bill. Bill looked just like me. And me and my brother, we backed each other's play right or wrong, under any conditions. And if you touched one of us, we would sneak into your house while you were asleep and beat the hell out of you at your bed with a baseball bat. And after a while, you do that enough time, people stop messing with you, you know, or else they just flat shoot you. And they didn't have no guns back then. This was in the late 50s and 60s. Things have changed a lot since then. These youngsters are all nuts. I don't blame my alcoholism on my father. If anything in the world, my father taught me what alcohol will do to a family. He taught me what it'll do to a marriage, what it'll do to children, what it'll do to a career. I had no illusions about alcohol. I always like to blame it on the San Diego Unified School District. In the early 60s, they had this idea. It was time to start educating the young people in San Diego County about the stuff that we don't talk about in A&A, allegedly. And they took us into this hall, and they brought these speakers in, and they showed us this movie. And when it was over, they turned the lights on, and I hit my partner, Balto, in the ribs. I said, "Balto, can you get some of this?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, my dad smokes this shit, you know." He goes, "Meet me after school tomorrow." I went, "All right." Met him after school. I said, "You get it?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "What do we do?" He goes, "Well, we got to steal some cheap wine." I said, "What for?" He goes, "I don't know, but my dad always drinks wine with this stuff, you know." And I didn't want to make any mistakes, you know. I was willing to go to any lengths. So we stopped this little market, and I stole my very first short dog, a sweet red port. I got that bottle of wine and went down this canyon, man. He fired up this reefer. I took a big hit off of it, coughed my brains out. Opened up that bottle, took a big pull off of it. Threw up all over myself immediately. But I ain't no quitter. I took another hit. Coughed my brains out. I took another pull off that wine bottle, and I held this one down. It bounced a few times, you know. And you go, yeah. Pretty soon it settled down there. I took another pull off that bottle. And right at that moment, Kip Collins experienced his absolute first spiritual experience. And I don't say that jokingly. Alcohol did something to me than nothing in this world has ever done. It made me a whole human being. Right then and there, alcohol, it took away the fear I'd been living in all my life. I wasn't afraid of nothing. It just disappeared. All of a sudden, my skin started getting darker. My hair got darker. My eyes started turning blue. I started speaking Spanish, Became a Mexican instantly. Balto was a real tough guy, and he started to throw his weight around with me. I beat his ass that day, And I said, I ain't afraid of nothing with liquor in my body, man. And you see, I knew about these first 3 steps a long time before I knew about Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew I was powerless over this world because it just scared me to death. I drank this wine and smoked this dope, and I came to believe that there was a power greater than myself, and I immediately, with no reservation, turned my will and life over to it, and I never looked back. And I guarantee you this, that if alcohol and narcotics would do for me what they did for me, I would not be here tonight on this side, I might be sitting out there, but wouldn't be up here, I'll guarantee you. My mama, I got kicked out of school, 8th grade, for beating up a teacher. They told me that I was, some kind of a sociopath, something or another. Truth was, he was a jerk. And, had it coming. Right after that, my mom came home. She found my dope. And my mom, man, I'll tell you about my mom. I watched her stick my dad 2 different times. I watched her knock out the next-door neighbor with a shovel for talking back to her one time. My mom impressed me, You don't talk back to my mom. My mom today, I'm 53 years old. She asked me to do something. I go, yes, ma'am. And it ain't never changed. I hear these people that stole something from their parents. Not me, man. I'd rather rob Fort Knox. My mom had hunted me down and skinned me. I don't have any doubt about it. She wouldn't let me slide, man. She don't even need to be anything about Al-Anon. She'd just kill you, My mama told me to hit the streets, man, and I hit it. I didn't know where to go, but I got out quick. Went over to a place in Carlsbad, California, and I'm standing there talking to a buddy of mine. He said, what are you going to do? I said, Jam, I don't know, man. I've never been anywhere. I'm 14 years old, never done nothing. He goes, check this out. And he breaks out the newspaper. He says, man, look at all these people are going up to this place in San Francisco, and all they do is get high and listen to music and make love. I like music. I hitchhiked up San Francisco, and I got in an area called the Haight-Ashbury District in 1964. Nobody had heard about it yet, really. It was rocking, man. And they were right. There was lots of music. I found out immediately that I was the worst hippie that ever hit San Francisco. I've been fighting since the gate. And these people, they're all, hey, man, give peace a chance, All I saw was opportunity, man. I went, whoa, look at all this white bread, man. They got all this money. They want this stuff. I know where it comes from. All my friends come from Mexico. I get on the phone. I call Balto. I said, Balto, check this out. I tell him what's going on. He says, come on back down here. Let's go talk to my family. So we go back down to Mexico. We talk to his family. We start a little enterprise. Very lucrative, I might add, and by the time before I was 16 years old, I was making an awful lot of money, and I was crossing that border a long time before I was old enough to go across. And when I was 16 years old in Mexico, on a little place called Todos Tomas, I got caught with 200 kilos of marijuana in Mexico. I had long blonde hair. I was 16 years old. I weighed about 130 pounds. And I was sentenced to 25 years to life in La Mesa Federal Penitentiary. Nice things don't happen to 16-year-old white boys with long blonde hair. If anything in the world, that ought to taught me the way I'm living my life. I need to change, man. But you see, I've been living all my life with such a low expectation of what life was going to offer me that it was just part of the rest of everything else, man. I called my buddy Balto. I finally got in touch with him. Balto got up there, and Balto had a family in that prison. family that I'd been doing a lot of business with indirectly. When they found out who I was, I had protection and things were okay. And actually, in the long run, it turned out to be one of the greatest career moves of my life. I love Mexico, man. I spent a lot of my life in Mexico. It works on a real simple principle. It's called mordida, and that means the little bite. And what it is, it's a very civilized country, and all you got to do is find out the right person and give them the right amount of money, and you can do anything you want. And you can walk away from any prison no matter what they got, especially in the 60s, you know. And I found out who the right people were, and I called my brother, and I said, bring down $5,000. And he came down, and we paid off the right person. And after just under a year, I finally got out of there. I got back across the border, and I continued doing what I was doing. On my 18th birthday, the cops came in, stuck a gun in my mouth, and woke me up with it. They told me they waited. It was at 5:30 on my 18th birthday, and they waited till I turned 18. They knew when my birthday was because they didn't want to charge me as a juvenile. And they took me down with 28 felonies. I was living with a woman, a wonderful young gal, grew up in my neighborhood, Hispanic gal, and she was pregnant. Now, I don't know about y'all, you know. I listen to young men that talk about what they wanted to be when they grew up and everything else, you know. You know, as long as I can ever remember, the only thing I ever wanted, I wanted to be a father more than anything in this world. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to have a home. I wanted a son to go do all the things I ever dreamed about doing. I wanted that more than anything in the world. Man, she was going to have a baby, and I was so excited about that baby, and they came and locked my ass up. And I fought that case for a little over 2 years. I finally beat it. But I spent just a little over 2 years in a county jail in a 4-man cell. I never got a visitor. I never got a letter. She had changed the number. The number had been disconnected. I couldn't reach her. I never heard nothing. I didn't know where this baby was. I didn't know what was going on, man. And when I got out of jail, I went looking for him, and I went to see her family. They told me to get away. This is a real nice family, man, and they didn't want this guy, what he had done to their sister, man. And they just said, get away from here. She's not in this state anymore. For many years, man, there was a big hole in my gut wondering about that child, where she was, what he was, live or dead. What do they know about me? Are they okay? You know, I ran into this girl, had a lot of money. She was 15 years old. About that time, this new narcotic came into San Diego. It was called Quaaludes. I called them Gorilla Biscuits. Man, I had an adverse reaction to those things, you know. I ended up going to jail 3 times in 1 week for doing something stupid, you know, and every time she bailed me out of jail. I never had anyone do that before. She got a judge out of bed to set bail for me. She was 15 years old. You know, I don't know anything about love, but I know a lot about jail. I'm going to tell you something. I got a gal that ain't sleeping until I get out of jail. I want her on my side forever. You know, and I married her. I went back to jail on another sales of heroin beef, and just a little deal. I did it for 9 months. Got out, was on parole. I knew I was never going to make parole to California, so I moved to a little town in Oregon. And me and Kathy went up there, man, and we got up there and moved into a little tiny town. Only had 200 people in it. They never heard of narcotics in that town. You know, everybody drank, and I stayed out of trouble, man. I just kept a real low profile, and I just sat home. I brought my shit with me, you know, and didn't get to know anybody. Just did my time. I just wanted that release date. She got pregnant while we were up there, and one day she says, come on, we got to go. I said, where are we going? She goes, we're going to go have a baby. And I said, really? So we went to this hospital. Thank you, brother. We went to this hospital, and I waited in this waiting room, and they came out, and I got to have my second spiritual experience. They came out, and they brought this little boy. And for the very first time in my life, the absolute very first time in my life, I experienced total, absolutely overwhelming, unconditional love for another human being. It was like being kicked in the guts, man. I'm not expecting an emotion that hard. And I looked at that child, and all I can tell you is my heart absolutely exploded. And I hold on to this baby, and I said, man, you're going to be my pal. Ain't nobody ever going to beat on you. I'm going to protect you. We're going to have all the stuff, man. We're going places. I'm going to protect you. No one will ever hurt you. And I meant it with everything I had. I got off parole there, and I came back down to California. She got pregnant again. We went to another hospital, and I walked in this hospital, and I waited, and they brought out this little girl, and they put her in my arm, Jana Marie. And it happened again. My heart exploded, and I fell in love. I looked at this little girl, and, I'll tell you all something. I don't know if you're like me, but I think quick. I think real fast. I'll be sitting in a meeting with Alcoholics Anonymous. Some pretty gal come walking in the back. I'll fall in love with her. We'll get married, have a couple of kids. She'll cheat on me with that old timer over there. I hate her. I hate her guts. She hasn't got to her seat yet, I mean, things happen quick in my head. I can live a whole lifetime before you get to your seat. I'm probably the only one like that, I'm holding on this little girl, and I'm looking at her, and all of a sudden I know some dog's going to want to come and want to marry my little girl one day. I'm thinking about the conditions. Kind of man's this, but boy, he better have it together. Where am I going to give this? I got to give her away. What am I going to wear? Where are we going to have the wedding? And she's 3 minutes old. I'm planning out her life, man. They haven't wiped the blood off, tied it in a knot yet, man. I already got her life planned out now. That's the way I live. I got out of there, man. For the next few years, I was probably one of the best fathers you could possibly be. The business I was in, I'd made an awful lot of money. I had a place in Mexico. I had a real nice place in California. I only worked about 2 to 3 weeks out of the year. The rest of my time I spent with my children. I had this place, and I had it fixed up for my kids. With swing sets, and there was a swimming pool, and there was a fishing hole, and there was everything for my kids. And it was a little compound, and my brother lived there with me, and my brother-in-law lived with me, man. And we were safe. It was safe. We had a big fence around everything. We knew everything that was coming and going, and it was ours. And my life was good, man. I didn't have a problem with drugs and alcohol. I did not. I used, I played around, I goofed around. Alcohol and drugs were not a problem to me. It was the way I lived. I could control it. The business I was in, I could go for a couple months without taking a drink if I needed to take care of business. When the business was over, I partied, but I took care of business first back then. One day, my wife and my daughter went to town. We went shopping, and me and my son was 7 years old. And we were playing, man. We were playing. They went to town, and a good friend of mine came over, and he brought this real good smoke over. We smoked this stuff, and he split. September 6, 1976. It was real, real hot that day. I got real thirsty. I didn't think about it, man. I was stoned. I was just loaded. And I just got on my bike, and I went up the street to go get a 6-pack of beer. I didn't even think about it, And I went up there. I got a 6-pack of beer, and I'm coming back down the hill. And when I'm coming down the hill, the police are at my house, the fire department's at my house, and all the neighbors are standing out in the middle of the street. And I'm going, what the hell's going on? And I pulled up, and I waded through that crowd, and I found out my son had chased me out to the driveway and been run over by a truck. And I waded through that crowd of people, and I found my baby laying there with his head split open, and I could see his brain. Some bones were protruding from everywhere. And something inside of me died. I went to a hospital with him, and I sat in intensive care for 9 months. For 9 months, I prayed out. I don't know nothing about God. Nobody ever taught me anything about God. But I cried out to give my son back. Man, I'll do anything. I'll change. I'll do anything in this world if you let me have my son back. We went through over 27 major brain surgeries. My son survived. He emotionally, mentally never grew past the age of about 3 to 4 years old. He couldn't talk, he couldn't hear. And he spent just about half of the rest of his life in hospitals. And every day I'd go to that hospital. First thing they would do was tell me to pray that he's going to die because he had so much brain damage. Every day they told me that. Every day I tried to make a deal with God. My brother got out of the hospital. He got out of the hospital and he went into a special hospital. My brother came down with a disease called schizophrenia. My family had him committed to a hospital. And after a little bit, he called me from that hospital and he said, Kip, get me out of here, man. I said, are you okay? He said, yeah, man, they're giving me these pills. I'm all right. Just get me out of here. You know, it don't matter where my brother was. Against the doctor's orders, against my parents' wishes, against my brother and sister's wishes, you know, I had the money and the juice, and I got him out of there. Brought him home with me, bought him a trailer, put it on the property across from mine. I owned that. And me and my brother continued doing what we were doing, man. And one day I came home. It was time for me to go make some money. I told him, I said, Bill, I got to go back east. I only need you to watch the kids for about 3 or 4 days, and I'll be back. And he said, you can't go, man. You can't go. I said, what do you mean I can't go? He says, I'm coming apart. I go, what do you mean you're coming apart? He goes, I don't know, man. These pills ain't working. I keep hearing voices and things are just going nuts, and you can't go. And I said, Bill, you know I got to go. You know I have to go. And I did what I've always done all my life, man. I handed him a handful of money. Money fixed everything all my life. And I gave him a handful of money. I said, hang on, bro. I'll be back in 3 days, and me and you will fix this. It's always been me and you. It always will be. I went back. I got back. This scam I was doing went sideways. Instead of 3 days, I was gone for 3 weeks. And I got back, and I'm asking, where's my brother? Nobody had seen him. Me and my little girl, Jana, she's 5 years old. We walk up over the street to his trailer, and I opened the door, and my brother's head rolled out at my feet. And his body was laying in the doorway, and it was just a big, giant pile of maggots. And it was dripping onto my feet. And another big piece of me died. You know, I don't tell you any of this shit because I need anyone's sympathy. There's only one point I tell you this. To drive home one very important fact, and that is this, that there's those among us who got here, chapter 5, with grave emotional mental disorders. And I'm one of those people. Because at that moment, something inside of me snapped like a branch breaking. You could hear it. And it was my very soul. And I tell you this, that I thank God I'm an alcoholic. I thank God alcohol does for me what it does. But alcohol affects me the way it doesn't affect other people. Man, it immediately erases guilt. It immediately stops the screaming in my head. It allows me to lay my head down. It stops the screaming in the morning. It allows me to walk through this day, one day at a time, reasonably comfortable in my own skin. And if it would not be for alcohol, I would not be here. I would have joined my brother, man. They talk a lot about bottoms in AA. My home group, Robbers Roost, 90% convicts. We got over 500 years inside in my home group. Our goal is to have 500 years sobriety amongst us, you know. So when someone gets drunk, we get real pissed off about it, you know, that they're an incredible group of men. Talk a lot about bottoms. Pissing and moaning, comparing bottoms. This one old guy, he says, I ain't too smart. He says, I dig ditches for a living. He says, I know what bottom is. It's when you put the shovel down. You know, I didn't want to put that shovel down. My wife made a career move at about that time. She left for the Cope Connection. It's a wise move. She left me there and she was gone. And people I did business with wanted nothing to do with me because I'm drinking around the clock. The money's going away. I'm sitting there on the couch with my daughter. She's crying because she's, up to this point, her life had been just a fairy tale. You know, her daddy had been there, her brother, her uncle, her mom, everybody loved her. Everything was always nice there. Now everything was crazy. She was with me. She was horribly scarred by that thing with my brother. And she's sitting there crying, and her mother's gone, and her uncle's gone, and her brother's gone, and it's just her daddy's drunk and acting nuts, and she's crying. And I'm sitting there on that couch saying, baby, I'm going to get it together. Don't worry, honey. Trust me. I'm going to get it together. This guy came over to my house, and he brought this stuff. I know you guys haven't heard of it. It's called Mad Dog 2020. I'd never heard of it before. And he brought this stuff over, man, and I started drinking this Mad Dog 2020. And the next thing I know, this lady said, excuse me, sir, you have to get off the airplane. I was in my living room. And I'm looking up, and I'm in this big jet. It's completely empty. My little girl's cuddled up next to me. No one else is on this airplane. And the stewardess says, you've got to get off the plane, sir. I said, where am I? She says, you're in Fort Lauderdale. I said, I hate Fort Lauderdale. She goes, I don't know nothing about it. You got to get off the plane. So, I did what anyone would have done. I just kind of got off the bus and very coolly trying to question my daughter, see if she's going to give me a clue what we're doing in Florida without raising undue suspicion. She didn't have a clue. So I did the next indicated thing. I called, I had to took my hand on I had a lot of money. I called a cab. I said, take me to a hotel, stop at a liquor store because I need to figure out what's happened here. Come to in this room, man, completely naked. Strapped down, 4 points. Bars on the window. And I've done a lot of weird things in my life, but I didn't even remember getting into this, and I don't know where my daughter is. I haven't got a clue where my daughter is. I don't know where I am. I don't know what happened. Finally, they came in. I found out that I'd met this couple in this hotel. They were drinking wild turkey, invited me over for a drink. I had a drink of wild turkey, and I thought it my duty to introduce them to this new beverage that I discovered called Mad Dog 2020. They started bringing in some of the local additives, and we mixed it all together and put it inside of Kip Collins, and he exploded. I went nuts, man. They called the cops. Cops didn't know what to do, man. They put me in county mental health, took away my clothes, absolutely everything, and just tied me down. When I come to, the psychiatrist come in and they said, I told him, about this horrible trauma I've been through, and, this is a big mistake. If you'll just let me out of here, I'll leave Florida immediately. I'll go back to California. I need to go see my doctor. And they said, yeah, just go. And I can't mention anything about my daughter. Can't say anything. I'm scared to death, but just let me out of here and I'll figure out what's going on. And when I got outside, that couple was standing outside with my daughter. And I grabbed hold of my baby and I said, come on, we're getting out of Florida. I told you this place sucks. And we did. And the next couple of years, it was never any different than that. I can tell you some horrible, horrible stories. But I'll tell you, we didn't have a home. We slept in abandoned cars. We slept in missions, abandoned houses. Every once in a while, I'd meet some real sick pre-Al-Anon woman, and she would take me in. Very quickly, I would burn that up, and we would have to leave. The last place, we got into Oklahoma City. I'm in Oklahoma City, and I'd gotten in a lot of trouble in Georgia, and I just barely made it out of that state. And I made a promise. I'm going to get it together. When I got to Oklahoma City, first time in my life, I got a job. A little manual job. I don't know how to do nothing, but I got a little job. I met a guy on the bus, and he had a thing going. He hooked me up, and I started working with this guy. And this guy said, well, I got a place you and your daughter can live with, a place where I was working. And I had a little place where we could live for the very first time. And I went to work, and I started working. I worked for 30 days, and I didn't take a drink, and I went absolutely nuts. 30 days later, I'm coming home from work, and this guy says, you want to stop and have a beer before we go home? It was payday. I said, man, that sounds good. I came in late that night, and I walked in that door. We didn't have a television. We didn't have a radio. And that little girl, she's 7 years old now. And I walked in that door, and she'd been sitting there waiting for me all night. She sat there, and she looked at me, and I'll never forget the look on her face. She took a look at me, and she just kind of dropped her head, because I had blood on me. She knew we were leaving. She grabbed her doll and her pillow and went and stood by the door, and I changed clothes, and I said, come on, we're getting out of Oklahoma. Got down to the bus station, drunk, got a bottle of wine, got on that bus. got 2 tickets back to California, drank that bottle of wine, passed out. I come through the next morning sick. I opened my eyes, and my little girl was sitting across from me in this thing, and she was rocking back and forth, holding her stomach, and she was crying, and I said, "What's the matter, baby?" She goes, "Daddy, I'm so hungry. You haven't fed me." I said, "Honey, as soon as we stop, I'm going to get you something to eat, girl." We pulled in this place, and I got out of that place, and I went in this little liquor store, and I got me a bottle of wine, got her a little sandwich, went up to go pay for it, and I only had enough money for one or the other. And I had to put her sandwich back. Tell you all something, man. I've done things that I don't ever share from the podium. I've done things that I only share on a one-to-one basis with my sponsor. I've never done anything in my life that haunted me more than that. That is the most shameful, the most disgusting thing, and it embarrasses me to even tell you about it. I got back to California, and I did what all heroes do at the end of the road. I went to Mom's house, I told you about my mom. I knocked on her door. She opened the door. She looked at me, and she looked at her granddaughter, long, stringy blonde hair, dirty face, obviously been crying. She looked at me, and I knew. I took a step back, She grabbed my daughter, pulled her in the house. She said, "Get off my property before I call the police, and don't ever come back here." And I thank God for my mom, man. She took my baby, saved her life. Next 3 years, I don't know. What I'm going to tell you, most of it's hearsay. I don't know what happened. I lived in a bamboo patch in Carlsbad, California, right on the Pacific Ocean, right on the Pacific Coast Highway. It was just below a little restaurant where the septic tank drained into this, and nobody would go in there because it smelled real bad, and there was spiders, and it was just funky. And then right across the Pacific Coast Highway, there was a 7-Eleven and a little biker bar. I'd stand out there and panhandle for wine till I got enough money for a bottle of wine, and I'd go back down to my place and I would drink until I ran out, and that's what I did all day, every day, until you arrested me, until I went to a nut house, until I hurt myself and ended up in a hospital. I don't know everything that happened. I know because of court records and of legal things I had to take care of after I got sober. I know I was arrested 52 times for drunk in public. I know that I was in 6 different mental institutions. I know that I was in the hospital, Tri-City Hospital, with the worst case of sunburn they had ever seen in Southern California. You ever sunburned your tongue or your armpit at the same time? We have a certain weather condition in California. It's called a Santa Ana. And so this hot wind blows, man, and it comes through, and it'll get up to like 110 degrees, and the humidity is absolutely 0. You look at something hard, it'll burst into flame. Some kind soul bought me a gallon of vodka. So I drank it, of course, and I passed out in the sun like this. I remember that. I'm standing in front of this thing one morning, man. I'm sicker than a dog. I know. I'm completely physically addicted to alcohol. I cannot stop drinking. I cannot. I'm scared to death to stop drinking. When you drink that sweet red wine all day long, every single day, man. When you start detoxing, you have nightmares and dreams that Satan himself couldn't even come up with. And I've detoxed so many times. I'm so afraid to stop drinking. I'm so afraid to stop drinking. I'm so afraid to go back into convulsions on those streets, to have to go back in those hospitals. I'm so afraid of it. And I'm standing out in front of a short dog cost 87 cents. I got 65 cents. Nobody's giving me a penny, man. And this car pulls up, and here's this square dude, man. He's wearing a square 3-piece suit. He's driving this square 4-door sedan. He's got this square little wife sitting in the front seat, these square little kids in the back. I looked at him once, shook my head, said, "How can you live that way?" He got out of that car. He came up to me, and he looked at me, and he just smiled, and he said, "Kip, I don't know how he even knew who I was, And I'm not here to talk about religion. I don't believe religion has any business in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I'll tell you something. That man gave me $2. I walked in that store, I got a quart of wine and another short dog, and as I shuffled out of that store, I pulled up that and pulled a big pull off that jug. I looked in that window and I saw that family looking at me. And I knew they were judging me, and I turned around and cursed them, and I walked back down to my bamboo patch. I knew they were judging me. They weren't judging me. I found out later those people are real good friends of mine today. It was a good Christian family on their way to church. They had stopped for something. They got out of their knees on that pavement that morning, and they prayed to the God of their understanding to intervene in this drunk's drinking. And I'm in this bamboo patch, and I'm opening up my bottle of wine, and I'm saying the magic word, La Porta, the doorway, let me through. And I'm starting to take a pull, and I have the damnedest thought I've ever had. I said, maybe I ought to go to A&A. Where'd that come from? See, I've been to A&A before. They made me go in those detoxes and those jails and, and all them nut houses, and them A&A people would come in there, and they would start talking all that stuff, and I would patiently try to explain to them that I wasn't an alcoholic. I'm a drug addict. I just can't afford any drugs right now. I mean, really, you guys know, drug addicts have a lot more class than any drunk, They told me to come to Alcoholics Anonymous someday. They laughed at me when I told them that. They said, if you ever find a time when you can't stop drinking and you want to, maybe you ought to come to AA. We love newcomers. We'll welcome you with open arms. I'm a user, man. I said, someone will welcome me? I'm going to tuck that away. I'm thinking maybe I ought to go to A&A. I ended up at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous that night. The meeting had already started, and I walked in the back door. The minute I walked in, I knew it was a mistake, because I was expecting this people to rush up to me because I was new and welcome me, And what happened is I walked in. Everyone kind of looked up at me in shock. I sat down next to this pretty little gal. She moved all the way across the room. I've been living in the same clothes for 3 years. My hair came down past my belt. My beard came down to my belly button. I weighed about 122 pounds, soaking wet, covered with wine sores. And a whole bunch of stuff lived on me besides me. It was a science project. How much abuse can a human body take? Let's just see. And I walked in, I sat down, and these people are going, you put out a real unique body order when you're 98% of everything going in your body for a couple of years is Gallo port wine. You put out just a real different fragrance, and I'd lost the ability to talk. I couldn't talk anymore. I could think of something to say, sometimes something very profound, but it would get stuck somewhere between my brain and my vocal cords, and it would just start stuttering, and I would start to say something, and I'd go, It was great for panhandling, but they asked me for my name, and I went, That didn't help things. So I'm sitting back, and they're looking at me. All these people are looking at me, and I'm going, man, I knew this was a mistake. All these people, I'm looking at them. They all got short hair, man. They all got cars. They're all clean. All these women look like they go to PTA meetings, but these people are all squares. What the hell am I doing here? They all come from the suburbs. And I'm sitting here, and I'm nervous, man. I'm so nervous. For pretty next thing, they're talking about God. Going, oh no. I saw them pass the basket. They're going to start singing. I know it. I got to get out of here. I stood up to leave. There was a lady that had been staring at me from the minute I walked in. Little old gray-haired grandma, been smiling at me, trying to catch my eye. I thought she was one of them brain-damaged gals I'd heard about, And I stood up to leave, and this guy was talking. This lady shot right to her feet, man. She cut this guy off. She said, I walked in these rooms 27 years ago. Cops brought me to the back door. The meeting was already started. Told me to get my ass in there. I'm tired of arresting me. Those people will help you. She goes, I walked in, I opened that door, and I looked at all you people. Your backs were to me. I already knew about all you men. I saw you women, and I knew you all went to PTA. You were ladies. I knew when you turned around and saw me and saw what I was, you would turn your back on me and ask me to leave the way society had always. She goes, I've been a street horse since I was 14 years old. I've done everything a woman ever had to do to survive out there. She goes, I've been going to prison in and out since I was old enough to go. She goes, when I got here and I saw you people, I felt dirty and I was ashamed. And I just wanted to leave, and I turned around to leave. But this lady saw me and grabbed me and put her arm around me and brought me into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and got me a cup of coffee and said, honey, don't go nowhere. We need you. This lady proceeded to talk about 27 years of doing this deal one day at a time, no matter what. She talked about the women that's helped her, that saved her life, that taught her how to be a woman. She talked about her sponsor that took her through these steps and got her involved, actively involved in service to Alcoholics Anonymous. She walked over in front of all those good squares that didn't want nothing to do with this cat, put her arms around me, kissed me right on the mouth. The bravest woman I've ever met in my life. She hugging on, squeezing on me and loving on my neck. And she says, baby, she goes, don't go nowhere. Please, don't go nowhere. We need you desperately. I want to tell y'all something. People have been beating on this guy's ass since I was 3 years old. I've had some atrocious things done to me. Nobody in this world has ever made me cry. I ain't never going to show an emotion or give you the satisfaction of knowing you're getting anything out of me. And I'm standing in front of all these squares, and this lady's holding me, and she's telling me that we need you. We need you desperately. And all of a sudden, man, there's this thing going on in the middle of my gut. I don't know what it was, man. It starts rocking back and forth. All of a sudden, my eyes started getting wet, and I'm standing there in front of all these squares crying like a baby. I've never done that in my life. And she's holding on to me. It's going, just keep coming back, baby. It gets better. It's going to be okay. Just keep coming back. So I started coming to A&A. Y'all lied to me right from the beginning, every one of you. Told me if I quit drinking alcohol, my life would get better. You know what happens when you take alcohol away from a real alcoholic? You know what's left? Ick. In about 3 days, I'm going, my God, why would anybody ever want to feel like this? Now, you also told me that I needed to get a sponsor. I said, what is a sponsor? They explained it to me. I said, man, that sounds like a parole officer. I'm not volunteering at one of these lops to run my life. He said, you got to do the steps. I go, what are the steps? And they show me these steps. And I'm looking at them and it says, I'm powerless. I ain't never been powerless. I've been packing since I was old enough to carry one, you know. I ain't never been powerless. I'm just having a little bit of bad luck right now. Saw this next one. It says, restore me to sanity. You know, they put me in a psychiatric care unit when I was 11 years old for trying to kill a guy with a Coke bottle over nothing. They told me that I was antisocial, sociopath, and all these big words. And, you know, and so if I've always been insane, what are you going to restore me to? So that one confused me. I drove right by that one. Then we got to this God stuff. Let me tell you something. The world I come from, the things I've done, the things I've seen people do for money and narcotics. If there's a God, he certainly has a perverse sense of humor, and I want nothing to do with that dude. He's got nothing coming from me. I got nothing coming from him. God wasn't there when I prayed in that jail when I first hit that Mexican prison. He didn't do nothing to save me. God wasn't there when my son got wasted. He wasn't there when that disease hit my brother. He put me in that insane asylum I grew up in. Ain't nobody God ever saved me from nothing. God likes those people in the suburbs. People like me, man, just piss him off. So I just drove right by that one, man. And we get to this next one. I said, what's this stuff? He goes, you got to make a list of everything you've ever done. I'm going, right. I know you guys are all victims here, but I learned when I was a little kid, you don't cop to nothing, even if they got pictures. You know? I mean, make them prove everything. Jury trial, I don't care what they have. Yeah, no, it's not me. You have made a mistake. I'd like to help you, but I gotta go. I'd come to these meetings, listen to you people talk about your problems right in front of everybody. Man, I'd be so embarrassed. Sometimes I'd just have to leave. Got to this next one and said, well, what's this? He goes, well, you got to make a list of every person you've ever harmed and go make it right. Loopy. Hey, it's Kip. Hey, man, I'm sorry I shot you and your dog. took all your dope. But I'm in recovery, and I'm in a spiritual manner of living now, and I'm here to make it right. You bet, huh? See, I didn't burn bridges. I knew him. You don't go back until the kinfolker did, you know? I wanted what you had, but I couldn't do these things, man. And I come to these meetings, and I stay sober absolutely as long as I possibly could, 3, 4, 5 days sometimes. And I kept coming to meetings every single day, and I did that for 6 years. For 6 years, I was in those meetings with my hands in the air, and I just kept coming because you're the only people that would let me come back. And let me tell you something, after a while, people even in Alcoholics Anonymous start turning their back on you. There's a group of people in Alcoholics Anonymous who never do that. I've noticed something since I've been sober. All the people that turned their back on me at about 5 years of trying to get sober, they're all drunk now. All the people that kept sticking their hand out to me, no matter what, racing to get to me first when I got to that door, are all still sober. Probably just a coincidence. I came to meetings. I wanted what you had so bad. And I would listen with hard as I could. I'd try to copy you in everything you did. But I couldn't do those steps. I couldn't get no sponsor. I couldn't tell you anything. I can't share a weakness with another human being. I'm constitutionally incapable of doing that. I come to Christmas morning, 1983. Cops had beat me down so bad they had cracked my skull in 2 places, broke my nose and my cheekbone. I'm butt naked, completely hog-tied in that rubber room with my face just stuck to that rubber mat. And I'm trying to pull my face off the mat and roll over. And as I peeled my face off that mat and I finally rolled over and I saw the cops standing in the windows looking down at me, laughing at me. And I knew Santa Claus wasn't coming. They let me out. You know, they know me so well. They said, Kip, we'll see you later. It's Christmas morning. I found out the same thing I have to always. I got in an argument with a cop. He beat me down and let me go. I made a conscious decision. I ain't going back to AA, man. AA ain't for me. I'm that person in Chapter 5. I'm constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself. I can't get sober. It's not for me. It's for you people. It works for you. Don't work for me. What works for me is alcohol. I cannot live without alcohol. I can't go a day without alcohol. I don't know how you do it. God bless you, but I can't. I'd had $90 saved up, and I went and spent $90 on Gallo port wine, and that's a lot of wine, fellas. And I carried it to this little place where this guy had let me live, and I started drinking that wine. And on January 6th, in 1984, I hit a spot they talk about in the Vision for You, and I've heard several speakers talk about it. And it's the spot, the scariest, the loneliest spot an alcoholic ever knows in his whole life. And that's the day that alcohol don't work no more. It says in the book, in A Vision for You, it says, there'll come a time when you cannot imagine life with alcohol or without it. Now, you're an alcoholic like I'm an alcoholic, and you've been to AA for 6 years, and AA don't work for you, and alcohol stops working for you. I'm going to tell you something. You're going to know loneliness is as few people can even imagine. If loneliness would have been a tangible thing, it would have absolutely eaten me alive. It says, come to the jumping off spot and wish for the end. Yeah, but when I knew that AA wasn't going to work, liquor ain't going to work, the insanity, it didn't stop the screaming in my head. It didn't put the pictures down. I couldn't sleep. It just amplified every pain, every emotion I'd ever had. I pulled out my gun and pulled it up to my chest, and I pulled the trigger, and I blew my left lung and 2 ribs out and knocked me all the way across the room. And I'm sliding down this wall, and blood's flying everywhere, and the only thought I got is, thank God this is over with. Let me out of this nightmare. Just let me out of here. I don't care what happens. Just stop this. When I come to in this damn hospital, you guys thought I died, didn't you? Came to in this hospital with this old guy in Alcoholics Anonymous. I hated his guts. His name was Charlie Tuck. Charlie Tuck said he had been in AA so long, they only had 1 A here when he got it. And he was one of those grateful alcoholics, you know, one of these old-timers. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. I just wanted to throw up on his wingtips every time he said it. He came up to me in a meeting one time in that 6-year struggle, and he got right down dead on my face. Looked me right in the eye. He says, you think you're pretty tough, don't you, kid? I looked him right in the eye, gave him my best jailhouse look. I said, I'm tough enough, old man. Don't you ever doubt that. He looked at me and he said, you ain't tough. He said, you're the scaredest son of a bitch in this room. Now, that might make you dangerous, but it don't make you tough. And he walked away laughing at me. Obviously, he didn't know how sensitive I was. you know. From that point on, every time I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I made sure he wasn't there before I went in. Well, I'll tell y'all something. When I got sober and I finally did my inventory and I got to my fears list, I'm going to share you what my fear was. The greatest fear that ran my life and rocked my life. And that was the fear of you men. See, I was scared to death of you guys. Absolutely terrified. But I was more terrified that you would see the fear. And I'll do anything in this world to prove to you I'm not afraid of you and prove to you that you can't hurt me. But inside, where no one else can see, I'm dying, man. I am the most terrified human being on this planet. And that ran my life. Come to in this hospital, and Charlie touched the foot of my bed, man. I'm standing there, and I come out of this coma. I've been out for about 4 days, and I open my eyes, and there's Charlie Tuck standing at the foot of my bed with that big, ugly blue book. He's got two newcomers with their eyes about this big staring at me. I think I've died. I've gone to hell. They got AA here. Charlie's here running, and I'm screwed, man. This is it. This is a bottom, let me tell you. Charlie didn't say one word to me, man. He put his arm around these two newcomers. He said, you see this poor, pitiful human being laying here? And they go, yeah. They go, this is what happens to an alcoholic who doesn't take the steps. Come on, let's go. They left. Didn't say a word to me. Those guys are still sober. They thank me they take a cake at the Thursday night workshop in Carlsbad, and they always thank me from the podium. You know, and I was doing active 12-step work a long time before I got sober. You know, I got out of there, I continued to drink. May 12th, 1984, I come to the same way I've come to 1,000 times. I come to hoping today's the day, maybe alcohol or narcotics or something's going to work. Something's going to block the pain. I got no choices, man. I got to keep trying something. AA don't work. Alcohol don't work. Women don't work. Dope don't work. Nothing works. There's so many of these A&A meetings, you people had poisoned my mind. Because the only thing I could think of was the ABCs right at the end of chapter 5. They said, I'm an alcoholic. I know I'm an alcoholic. I hear this stuff about denial, and I ain't got no problem with me denying I'm an alcoholic. I know I'm an alcoholic. Thank God I'm an alcoholic. Alcohol works for me, man. I can't live without alcohol. The book says to your innermost self, it don't matter what I admit to you, to your counselor, to my sponsor, or anyone else. It says inside here, my innermost self. What does that word mean to me? That morning I had a vision. I had a vision of that morning getting on that bus with that little girl with the love of my life. And it suddenly dawned on me here where I live what alcohol does to Kip Collins. And what alcohol does to me is the minute I put alcohol in my body, from that minute on, it don't matter about who I love, what I love, my plans, my dreams, and it sure as hell don't matter about yours. I got to do whatever alcohol tells me to do, and it always says, get me some more. And I'll give up anybody to get it. And there's no room in your life for another human being unless they are helping you drink. If there's anyone in between that you can't have those in your life, alcohol tells me where I can sleep. It tells me when I got to get up. It tells me how far I can go. It runs every single area of my life. It says that no human power is ever going to fix me. That scared me to death. I kept hoping one of those gals in AA was going to fix me. But that left the last thing, the one thing I've been avoiding since I got here. It says that God couldn't, would if he were sought. Thought about the people who had what I wanted in Alcoholics Anonymous. It wasn't their money, it wasn't their women, it wasn't their stuff. It was the look in their eye and the way they walked through this world one day at a time without a drink, no matter what. They did it with dignity. Every one of them talked about this power that they had tapped into. When I got on my knees that morning and I said this prayer that ain't changed much from that day to this, I said, you know, I don't know who you are. And I don't know what you are, and I sure hope it don't make no difference. But from this day forward, I will do whatever you put in front of me if I don't have to drink. And if you're not there, I'm screwed. There was no deals. I knew right then and there that if I could hold on to that, I wasn't going to have to drink. I got over to Charlie Tuck's house. Where else am I going to go? Knocked on his door, his lovely wife, Edie. She opened the door and she looked at me and she had this big smile on her face. She was a member of Al-Anon for over 40 years. She said, oh, Charlie's going to be so happy to see you. You know, you're his favorite. I said, I am? I found out later she sold that to everybody, you know. Man, I needed that right then. She said, oh, come on, come into the back porch, you know. Charlie will be so happy to see you. And so I go back out there. She brought me a glass of orange juice and K-Rose syrup. She goes, sit down here and try to get this down. It'll help a little bit. Charlie came out there with that big, ugly blue book. He sat down and looked at me. He says, Kip, what can I do for you? I said, Charlie, I don't want to drink no more. He goes, I've heard you tell me that a lot of times. He goes, what's different? I said, I don't know. He says, what are you willing to do? I said, anything you tell me. He goes, Kip, I got some good news and I got some bad news for you. I can tell you the bad news first. The bad news is people like you don't get sober. People like you die in institutions. You die on the side of the road. They don't even mention your name. Good news is this. It's obvious to me that God has opened a window for you. I suggest you step through with both feet, and this is the way it's going to have to be for you one day at a time, every day of your life. And that is one simple little fact, and that is this, that nothing, absolutely nothing, no woman, no job, no child, no nothing in this world could be more important than you doing the deals you have to do to stay sober. And that's a lot more than just going to meetings. Are you willing to do that? And I said, yes, sir. He says, come with me. It was on Mother's Day, 1984, and he took me across the street at this park he had. He says, get on your knees. And there was all these families there having picnics with their parents and stuff. And I looked at him, and he got down on his knees, and he wanted me to get down on my knees in front of all these people. He said, Chip, these people have been stepping over you for years. Get on your knees, son. Never be ashamed of God. And I got on my knees, and oh, man, the first thing he taught me to do in Alcoholics Anonymous was taught me how to pray. He took me back to his house, and he took me into his home, and he detoxed me. He set me in this room and played AA tapes, some of the old AA old-timers. The guys he sponsored came over and told me their story. He sat there and he talked to me. He talked to me with love, and he talked to me with compassion, and he talked to me with the language of heart of Alcoholics Anonymous, of one alcoholic man talking to another alcoholic man. And I said, how did you know that about me, about that fear? He goes, because you're just like me. I saw it. He says, I grew up on the streets of Chicago in the 20s, and I've done everything you've ever had to do, and I knew who you were when you walked in the room. You don't have to live that way no more. Charlie Tuck got me back to be involved in service in Alcoholics Anonymous, and this is the way it had to be. I had to carry a minimum 5 commitments a week in Alcoholics Anonymous. The first thing he told me to do, he told me I had to get a job. I said, a job? I said, I've never had a job. I need to work on my recovery. Sober people work. Sober people pay their own way. You go get a job. I go, what do I do? He says, get on your knees. Tell God you need a job. In fact, you need a trade. You're 36 years old. Time to learn how to do something. So God, I don't have a driver's license. I said, God, I need to learn a trade. I'll take whatever you got. I said, okay, now what? He says, walk out to the street and take the first thing God's got for you. I'm going, oh boy. I walked out to the street, stuck my thumb out to hitchhike into town to go look for a job, and a pickup truck rolled up. Guy rolled the window down and said, hey, man, you want a job? Scared me to death. He was a painting contractor. Make a long story short, I went to work for that man. I became one of the bigger painting contractors in Southern California for a long time. I got all the stuff, man. I got the house, I got the boats, I got the cars, I got to travel around the world, I got the respect. Didn't happen overnight. I met her at an A&A meeting. We got married. Wonderful, man. First woman I ever fell in love with. First woman I ever experienced true intimacy with. That I stood in the daylight, took off all my armor, and showed her exactly who I was, and she didn't back up. And I loved her, and I never let myself do that before. I'd be so excited about seeing her, man. And when we had such a good relationship, everything was so wonderful. At 3 years sobriety, state of California gave me my driver's license back, which is another whole pitch. I got my contractor's license, and I got a phone call. And this little girl, I walked in, she says, your name Kip Collins? And I said, yeah. She goes, did you know Sandy so-and-so? And I said, and a long time ago. She goes, that's my mother, and you're my daddy, and I want to get to know you. That little girl came into my life. She brought me 3 grandchildren. I got 5 minutes, and I got a lot to tell you in 5 minutes. I'm going to tell you how well Alcoholics Anonymous works. At 10 years sobriety, I opened up the newspaper one morning, and I looked into the front page of the story. I'm just reading a story of a man who broke into a woman's house and raped her in front of her children all night long, and then when he was done, took a knife and cut her to pieces. I got down to the bottom of the page, and it was my daughter. I'll tell y'all something straight up, man. absolutely capable of first-degree murder. You'd touch anything of mine. I'm absolutely nuts and insane. But my sponsor told me this. He said, nothing can be more important than me being sober. Nothing can be more important than me doing the things I have to do to maintain my sobriety. In the book, it tells me, it doesn't say, there's no shortcuts, you see. It doesn't say anything about that. It says this. It says, for me to live in anger with resentment, it'll cut me off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity will return, and I'm going to have to drink. It says, if I can't get rid of a resentment, it doesn't say unless someone does your daughter, man. It says, if you can't get rid of a resentment, you got to pray for that man. Hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Right after that, they told me I had cancer. Told me they had to cut my lip off. I had to go through a massive surgery, plastic surgery. And see, I'm a junkie. I don't talk about it, but I'm a junkie. And I'm going through emotional pain. And I got to do this surgery. I got to do it with Novocaine and aspirin. And I did it. I did not do that one with dignity, though. They cut my lip from here to here to here. Plastic surgery. And that hurt. And I did not do that with dignity. I snivelled and bitched for a long time about that one. The woman that I adored, man, she came and she just finally told me, she goes, you know, Kip, I can't do this no more. I'm going to drink. She goes, I'm a lesbian. I'm in love with Chrissy and I got to go. And she left me. Tore my heart out. I got attacked by a dog a month after that. I almost had my arm torn off. I was in the hospital. It took every penny I had. I couldn't work anymore. I lost the house. I lost everything in the world that I'd worked for, all the material stuff. When I got out, and the only thing left in my life was my son. And me and my son, I had to take him to the hospital because something was wrong. And I sat in the hospital with him for 3 months, and he died in my arms. I'm going to tell you, I got sober so that I could accept life on life's terms. And I can tell you on a one-to-one basis how I got through each one of those, but I'm going to tell you how I got through it. I got through it with the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't drink no matter what. You see, I'm not real smart. I burned up most of my brain cells. The only couple of things I know absolutely. And the one thing I do know is this. No matter what I got to do to stay sober, it's easier to stay sober than to get sober again. That's all I know. Today in my life, I'm going to wind it up real quick. You see, I didn't drink, and everything left away. All the material stuff, all the people, everything I loved went. I thought my life was over with. Today, I'm married to a wonderful woman. I got a beautiful house on the hill. I got a business that makes more money than I've ever made in my life. I get to travel around the world talking to people like you on a regular basis. I got a 5-year-old daughter, and I got a 3-year-old son. I'm 53 years old, and I pull in the driveway. My kids tear the screen door out and run up and call me Daddy. What'd you bring me? I got the respect of my community. I've got the respect of my family. I'm an active member of my life in every single area, you know. And anything I know about how to live in this world, I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. I learned how to walk through absolutely anything and do anything in this world clean and sober. The good times and the bad times, you know. The bottom line is this. My message is real simple. You know, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous will work for absolutely anybody, anywhere, under any circumstances. It don't matter what you've done. It don't matter what you haven't done. If you're willing to live by these principles will allow you to live in this world. It'll give you a life you won't even dream, no matter where you are. I want to thank you all for letting me come here. I sure wish I had about another hour. But I'd sure like to take you on a real long journey about recovery. But thanks for letting me be here. And thank you, Steve, for that ship. My home group sends their love to you guys. And we pray for all of you for an early release and a good life. Thank you.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce that this first ever prison convention is closed. Quick, I want to thank Jim again. I know he's in the back. I know he's listening. Thank you, Jim. And let's close out with the Lord's Prayer. Who kept us sober today?
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. If you love us and pass, You can get those who trespass against us. May the sin of temptation. As rather shimming. Seek help them. Our Lord. Forever and ever. Amen.
Keep coming back. The works to be working.